Chapter 151 Headhunting. Some time later, they were standing in front of a makeshift cabin. Just like Changing Star's patchwork dwelling, the cabin was constructed out of mismatched stone blocks that had been scavenged from the ruins. It was reinforced with monster hides here and there and seemed to be built slightly better than the rest of the hovels in the outer settlement. There was a large bestial skull hung above the door, its thick forehead split apart by a devastating strike of some sharp weapon. Glancing at the skull, Nephites took a step forward and knocked on the door. However, no response followed. Sunny sighed. Maybe she's not home. Instead of an answer, Changing Star frowned and banged on the door with her fist. The first strike was somewhat gentle, but by the last, the bestial skull was on the verge of flying off the wall. A sleepy and irritated voice sounded from the inside. I swear to gods, whoever you are, you'd better be a nightmare creature. A few moments later, Sunny heard the sound of footsteps approaching the door. Before it opened, though, Nephi suddenly spoke. Sunny, turn away. Hearing a strange urgency in her voice, he scowled and did as she had asked. Your shadow, too? What is going on? Are we expecting trouble? As he was staring away from the cabin, the creaking of wood informed him that the door was flung open. Who the hell is… Oh! It's you! He swore he could hear Neff's teeth grinding against each other. A few seconds later, Changing Star spoke, her tone especially flat. Put on a memory, Effie. Please! Wait, what? Why would she… Oh. When he was finally allowed to turn back, the last glimmers of ethereal light were yet to disappear from the fabric of Effie's provocatively short chiton. She wasn't wearing anything underneath either. Here. Better? The huntress was exactly the same as the last time he had seen her, tall, strong, and brimming with vitality. Without the bronze cuirass with leather terrages, as well as other elements of the archaic armor, even more of HEW dewy olive skin could be seen. So you guys are back together, huh? Judging by how clean and shiny the other two look, I'm guessing that their stay in the castle was pleasant. Sunny glanced at Cassie, then said in a reserved tone. Not particularly. Just like you said, the ambience there is, well, an acquired taste, I guess. Effie grinned. Well said. Anyway, how can I help you? Changing Star motioned at the door. Can we come inside? The unruly huntress glanced back, then shrugged. Sure. Why not? Inside, the cabin was small and cozy. One of its corners was occupied by a large pile of furs that served Effie as a bed. At first glance, it didn't seem that lavish, but once it hit Sunny that each of the furs had come from the corpse of a nightmare creature, he quickly changed his mind. That was probably the most extravagant thing he had ever seen. Also, one could only imagine what went on between those furs. Pure thoughts, Sunny. Focus. There was also a fireplace, a table with a single wooden chair, and a pair of sturdy chests. The rest of the space was occupied by various curios that the huntress had scavenged from the ruins over the years. There was no particular logic to this opulent collection except for the fact that each object had once caught her fancy for this reason or that. After the three of them were seated, Effie returned to her pile of furs, wrapped herself in one of them and asked, So, what's so important that you had to come and wake me up this early in the morning? Early in the morning? It's already noon. Nephi lingered for a few moments, then said, You haven't hunted since the day we met. Right? Effie yawned, then said in a languid tone, Nope. I'll go back into the ruins once my food runs out. Which will be in a day or two, I think. What? How? The amount of meat she had butchered off those monsters was enough to feed a person for a couple of months. It was all gone already? Just how much did the vigorous huntress eat? Changing Star nodded. When you do come with us. Be our pathfinder. Well, she certainly doesn't beat around the bush. For some reason, Sunny had not expected Neff to be this direct. He had always imagined this conversation taking much longer before getting to its real purpose. Effie stared at them, then threw her head back and laughed out loud. Ah, that's a good one. Do you want me to be your nanny too? When her laughter died down, she shook her head and said, No offense, kids, but you have just arrived in the Dark City. You are as green as it gets. Best hunters out here wanted me to become a part of their party, and I refused them all. Do you know why? Neff nodded with a serious expression. Most hunting parties share the spoils of their hunts. Each hunter keeps a part to eat and sells the rest to the people in the slum. But because of your flaw, you can't allow yourself to do the same. You need all the sustenance a hunt can provide. The more partners you have, the lesser your share will become, so you hunt alone, and never sell the meat of your prey, just their hides. Effie smiled. I see someone has been doing their homework. Changing Star tilted her head a little and, not paying any attention to the irony in those words, continued. We can solve that problem by. However, the solitary huntress interrupted her. Stop. Good guess, but you are wrong. That is not why I refused all those hunters. Nephi's blinked, surprised. After a long pause, she asked, a hint of confusion in her voice. Then, why? The smile disappeared from Effie's face. Because they are weak. Every one of them is weak. Even the most successful of them are. And do you know why? Something dark gleamed in her hazel eyes. They are weak because Gunlog will never allow anyone strong to exist outside of his control. So, I am not going to be your pathfinder. Sorry, Princess. Changing Star froze, obviously flustered by that answer. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again and awkwardly pressed her lips together. No matter how much she had honed her social skills during their journey through the labyrinth, this conversation still seemed to be too much for her. In the ensuing silence, Sonny suddenly spoke, his voice calm and slightly provoking. He's allowing you to exist. Effie looked at him, raised one eyebrow with a smile, and didn't say anything. Finally, Nephis was able to compose herself. We might be new here, but we are not weak. Between the two of us, Sonny and I had killed dozens upon dozens of awakened creatures in the labyrinth. The huntress interrupted her once again. Even if that's true, that was there. Out here in the Dark City, things are very different. The two of them stared at each other, one with a relaxed smile on her lips, the other with stubborn flames burning in her eyes. Oh, I don't like this. Eventually, Changing Star grimaced and said, So, if we prove that we have strength, you might reconsider? Effie chuckled. Damn! You say it like it's easy. You do know how many people can't even step a foot into the ruins, right? If you guys survive in this hell for a few years, maybe then we can talk again. Nephis looked at her for a while, and then smiled darkly. We will talk again in the evening. Then, you will change your mind. Chapter 152 There and Back Again. Outside, the sun was already moving past its zenith. There wasn't that much time left before the sunset, so Sonny was really unsure about what Nephis could do to change Effie's mind before evening. However, judging by the determined expression on her face, Changing Star wasn't just throwing words to the wind. She had something specific in mind. He hesitated. So, what exactly are we going to do now? Neff glanced at him, white flames dancing in the depths of her cold gray eyes. Then, she turned away and said, Follow me. With that, she walked forward in the direction of the castle. Castle? Why are we going to the castle? Somewhat uneasy, Sonny gently took Cassie by the arm and hurried to catch up to Nephis. When he did, she suddenly threw over her shoulder. Tell me about that Pathfinder again. The one who was accused of murder 3 days ago. Sonny frowned, then repeated what he knew about the guy. When he was almost finished, she asked, What's his aspect ability? He hesitated, then said, He can make any weapon become incredibly sharp when it's in his hands. Sharp enough to cut stone, maybe even steel. It's a very powerful combat ability. Changing Star was quiet for some time, then said, What about his flaw? Sunny shook his head. That I have no idea about. People are very protective of their flaws, you know. Not everyone goes around telling everyone about their greatest vulnerability like that lunatic, Effie. Cassie, who seemed to be very protective of him today, decided to support this claim. Sunny is right, Neff. We don't even know what his own flaw is, remember? Sunny almost stumbled and had to try very hard to not let any emotion show on his face. Cassie was right, of course. While Changing Star and she had shared their flaws with him, Sunny never reciprocated the gesture, for obvious reasons. That is true, but, can we not talk about that? Nephi silently nodded and didn't comment on it further. It seemed as though her mind was on something else. Phew. Soon, they scaled the magnificent stairs and were approaching the gates of the castle. Sunny was growing increasingly nervous about Neff's intentions. What is her plan exactly? Neff? What do you need us to do? She shrugged, then said in her usual indifferent tone, You don't really need to do anything. Just follow me and try to look, virtuous. Look virtuous? What does that suppose to mean? The guards standing watch in front of the gates blocked their path with contemptuous and suggestive looks in their eyes. Contempt was directed toward Sunny, while the rest was directed toward the girls, of course. Stop. What business do you have in the Bright Castle? Want to pay the tribute? Or maybe want to get paid instead? If you know what I mean. Both of them laughed, making Sunny's blood boil. Nephi looked at them with a calm expression, then said, I want to go inside, but I'm not going to pay tribute. The laughter suddenly stopped. The guards looked at them with a bit of amusement, a harsh and dangerous light finding its way into their eyes. Have you lost your mind, wench? Why are you here if you're not going to pay tribute? Stop wasting our time. Changing Star stared at them with no emotion whatsoever showing on her beautiful ivory face. Then she said evenly, I'm here to invoke the right of challenge. For a few seconds, everyone stayed silent. Sunny's heart was beating like a wild beast in his chest. Mad. She has gone mad. But no, Changing Star was not mad. Although Sunny liked to joke inwardly about how crazy Nephi was, she was anything but. In fact, her ability to remain cool-headed and rational in any situation was one of the main reasons that made her so dangerous. Which meant that there was some opportunity she saw here that he didn't. At least he hoped that this was the case. Meanwhile, one of the guards frowned. Stop joking around, little girl. Shut your mouth and get lost if you want to live. Neff didn't move. Instead, she said, I'm not joking. The other guard stared at her, then shook his head. Those slum rats have really all gone crazy, huh? I thought that this recent show would teach them a lesson, but it seems as though it did not. He sneered. Listen, lass. The right of challenge is not a laughing matter. It's a fight to the death. No one is going to go easy on you just because you have a pretty face. Do you understand? Changing Star simply nodded. The guard waited for a while, looking at her tall figure and the crude tunic that she wore. Then he grimaced. I guess we'll have some entertainment today. Ugh, such a shame. With your looks, you could have lived in the castle without ever even needing to pay the tribute. Shaking his head, he turned around and gestured for the three of them to follow. The other guard stayed behind, a bewildered and darkly excited expression on his face. With the sound of the rusty chains swinging in the wind invading their ears, Sunny, Nephi, and Cassie passed beneath the hanging skulls and entered the castle. Inside, everything was exactly the same. Even Harper was still sitting behind his opulent desk, writing something on a piece of parchment. Hearing the sound of footsteps, he raised his head and threw a furtive glance in their direction. An expression of confused surprise appeared in his eyes. Sunless and Kasia? What are you guys doing back here? Sunny felt the desire to palm his face. When he had said to the gaunt young man that they might see each other in the future, he certainly did not mean that that future would be on the same damn day. Not knowing about the thoughts raging in his head, Harper smiled. Oh. Did you guys get lucky and come into some shards? Back already to pay the tribute? Sonny gritted his teeth and forced out a weak smile. No. Not exactly. Chapter 153 Guiding Star. By the time the three of them were led to the grand hall of the castle, the news that there was going to be another challenge had yet to spread through the entire fortress. Because of that, there was no crowd there, just a few dozen people who had happened to walk past and heard the commotion. However, their number was growing with each minute. Standing before the entrance to the hall, Nephice was calmly looking forward, her thoughts a mystery. She seemed to be steady and collected. Sonny, on the other hand, was very nervous. Just what was Changing Star planning? Glancing around to make sure that no one could eavesdrop on their conversation, he leaned to her and whispered, "You're not really going to fight one of Gunlog's lieutenants, are you? Because that would be suicide." No matter how talented and strong Neff was, she couldn't hope to win against someone like that, at least not before absorbing enough soul shards to even the odds at least a little. Those people had not gotten to where they were by pure accident, too. They had talents of their own. Nephice didn't turn her head and simply said, "The walls have ears." Sonny gritted his teeth and was about to retort, but at that moment, the guard that had led them inside appeared from the grand hall, threw a dark look at them, and spat. "Come on in, fools." Changing Star simply walked forward, leaving Sonny and Cassie no choice but to follow. Inside the hall, a small crowd of people was staring at the entrance. When they saw Nephice, a wave of confused whispers ran through their ranks. "Who is that? Never seen her before. There's something strange about that girl." The whole situation was much less ostentatious and theatrical than that on the day of Jubiai's death. Most of the lieutenants weren't even here, not to mention the Bright Lord himself. Only the leader of hunters, Gemma, was sitting on the steps leading up to the empty white throne. On his face, there was a slightly sullen expression. To Sonny's relief, Haru's was nowhere to be seen. When the guard led the three of them inside, Gemma raised his head and glanced in their direction with a frown. "Did I hear it correctly? One of you three wants to invoke the right of challenge?" Nephice took a step forward, looked him right in the eyes, and answered in her usual indifferent voice, "I do." Her calmness was in direct contradiction with the heavy meaning behind those words. It was the polar opposite of the impassioned, scornful, furious speech of condemnation that Jubiai had given in this hall 3 days ago. The confused frown on Gemma's face deepened. "You do know what that means, right, little girl?" She continued to stare at him without showing any sign of fear, then repeated, "I do." The tall hunter sighed. "Listen, it is indeed true that anyone has the right to invoke the right of challenge. But throwing your life away is a really stupid thing to do. I'm sure that you had to suffer a lot to make it this far. Everyone here did, pretty much. So how about you think about it some more and reconsider?" His voice wasn't unfriendly. In fact, it seemed sincere, as though Gunlog's lieutenant really did not want to see her die for no reason. However, his words fell on deaf ears. Neff just tilted her head a little and said, "No need." Gemma sighed again, then shook his head. "Fine, have it your way then. Who are you here to accuse?" Sonny already had the idea. That's why he wasn't surprised to hear her next words. "I am here to accuse the Pathfinder known as Andal." Andal was the person whose crime had led to Jubiai's challenge, and then death. As another wave of whispers rose from the crowd, Gemma blinked. With an unhappy scowl on his face, he said, "As I've told the last time, I am the leader of both hunters and pathfinders. Any crime they commit while performing their duties is my crime, so I will be the one to answer for it. Are you sure you want to challenge me, kid?" Sonny held his breath, knowing that Neff's next words would decide their fates. Despite the older man's heavy tone, she did not even flinch. However, she did pierce him with a cold gaze, then slowly shook her head. "I'm not here to accuse him of murdering the young man from the outer settlement. I'm here to accuse him of theft. Andal has lost a considerable amount of soul shards while gambling, but refused to pay. That is stealing. Since it was done on his private time and not while performing any official duties, you have nothing to do with it. Gemma stared at her, a bewildered look written clearly on his face. Sonny was doing the same. Well, that was unexpected. Kind of ingenious, actually. Who knew Neff can be so crafty? By shifting the accusation from a crime committed during a hunt to a misdemeanor that had nothing to do with Andal's role as a pathfinder, she effectively prevented any of the lieutenants from fighting on his behalf. At least if they remained true to their claim of being just. But was a seasoned pathfinder any less of a threat than one of Gunlog's proxies? And would Gemma even allow a challenge like that to proceed? As though responding to his questions, the tall hunter raised his eyebrows and said in disbelief, "What? A gambling debt? You want to? Did Aiko send you?" Nephi shook her head again. "No. I've never even met her." Everyone in the Grand Hall looked at her as though she was insane. The charismatic lieutenant was no exception. With some exasperation finding its way into his voice, he asked, "If you don't even know the person Andal owes the shards, why are you here challenging him on her behalf?" Neff simply shrugged. "Do I need to personally know the victim of the crime to punish the criminal?" Gemma stared, clearly finding the whole situation ridiculous. "It's just a gambling debt. I can pay the shards myself, and we all can." However, Changing Star interrupted him. Her voice was still inexplicably calm and even. "It's not about shards. It's about justice and law. After all, the law is our only guiding star in this dark world. Without its light, there's only darkness." Her words echoed in the Grand Hall and put a grim expression on Gemma's face. By repeating what Gunlog had said here a few days prior, she left him with little choice but to satisfy the request for a challenge. After all, going against it would be tantamount to going against the Bright Lord's will. How devious! Did she learn that from me? The hunter looked away with regret, remained silent for some time, and then said to one of the guards in a dark tone, "Go and bring Andal here. Tell that bastard that after he kills this stupid girl, he and I will have a long conversation about his life choices." Then he glanced at Neff and said, "And you, say your goodbyes and prepare for battle." "Oh, right. What is your name?" "Tell us. That way, you will at least be remembered." Looking him right in the eyes, Nephi stayed quiet for a bit, and then answered. Her clear voice resounded loudly in the Grand Hall. "I am Changing Star of the Immortal Flame Clan." Suddenly, everything became silent.